My wife deserves better than you, Clara. Those were the exact words my husband Marcus spat into my face one night, his voice dripping with contempt, as if I was nothing but a burden. The sting wasn't from his insult. It was from the cruel twist of irony, knowing I had funded the life he flaunted with another woman. That beach house? My money. That car? My paycheck. And still, he paraded his mistress into the home I bought, laughing as if betrayal was a sport. He thought I'd be blind forever, but what he didn't know was I was already waiting. My wife deserves better than you, Clara. The words echoed in my skull long after Marcus had left the room that night. He thought they would crush me, reduce me to a trembling shadow of myself. But instead, they settled like a shard of glass under the skin. Painful, yes, but sharp enough to cut through the haze I'd been living in. Marcus Whitmore was everything society loved to admire. A polished man with tailored suits, smooth charisma, and the kind of confidence that filled a room. To outsiders, we were the perfect couple. I was the young attorney with a promising career. He the successful consultant with connections stretching across the city. Our photographs on the walls told the story of ambition and elegance, our smiles frozen in frames like trophies. But behind the polished veneer, cracks were spreading through the glass. It began with small things. His phone always face down on the table, his quick reflex to silence calls, the way he carried his laptop everywhere, as if it held something more valuable than our marriage. He started coming home later, muttering about client dinners and urgent projects. Receipts disappeared from his wallet, but our credit card bills grew higher. When I asked about it, he smirked as if I was paranoid. "You're working too many hours, Clara. You're stressed. That's why you're imagining things," he told me one night, pulling me close just enough to shut me up, not to comfort me. His voice was warm, honey layered over venom. Gaslighting, I would later learn to call it. But even then, in those early moments, I felt the shift. I felt myself becoming an outsider in my own home, like a guest walking through a stage set where I no longer belonged. I had built the foundation. We had bought that house with my salary as the down payment, but Marcus strutted inside it like he was king. And me? I was left doubting my own sanity, wondering if my suspicions were the problem. Still, something in me refused to die quietly. One night, long after Marcus had claimed he was working late, I sat at my desk and opened his email account. The password was the same one he had used for years. His arrogance was both a shield and a weakness. My breath froze in my throat as the inbox loaded. Among the mundane client messages was one that stood out, a reservation confirmation for a weekend getaway, a suite at a beachfront house. The name on the booking chilled me. Whitmore. But the payment source? My bank account. The house wasn't a rental. It was the one I had purchased in my name. A retreat I had imagined for us, a place for renewal. He was taking someone else there. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. The confirmation mocked me, each line of text a wound deeper than the last. Marcus wasn't just betraying me emotionally. He was using what I built to fund his fantasy. That night, I began to keep a secret record, a journal locked in the bottom drawer of my desk, filled with dates, expenses, words he had thrown at me. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proof. Every entry was a stone I stacked quietly, building a wall he would one day crash into. Weeks passed, and then the truth bared itself in the cruelest way. I returned home late from court, exhausted, craving nothing but sleep. Marcus was already out, claiming yet another emergency meeting. I dropped my bag onto the sofa and glanced toward the dining table where his jacket lay carelessly. Something metallic slipped from the pocket and clattered to the floor. My pulse quickened as I bent down to pick it up. It was a small photo print, glossy and damning. Marcus's arm slung over a woman's shoulder, his lips curved in a smile I hadn't seen in months. Her hair was chestnut brown, her dress expensive, her eyes wide with the gleam of victory. Olivia. The name surfaced like poison I didn't know I had swallowed. I sank onto the couch, clutching the photo. For a moment, my chest caved under the weight of betrayal. The tears I expected never came. Instead, a strange calm spread through me, a cold clarity. My heart wasn't shattering, it was hardening. "The game has begun," I whispered into the silence, the photo trembling between my fingers. Days later, I began to dig into her. A simple search pulled up more than I anticipated. Olivia wasn't just anyone. She was married. Married to a man named Ethan Hale, a respected architect, a man who, by the look of things, had no idea his wife was sneaking into the arms of Marcus Whitmore. The discovery left me stunned, not because Marcus had cheated. That wound had already festered, but because of the ripple this betrayal carried. This wasn't just my story anymore. This was a web tangled with greed, arrogance, and secrets stretching beyond my marriage. I closed my laptop slowly that night, the glow of the screen fading, but not the fire in my chest. Marcus thought I was blind. Olivia thought she was clever. But neither of them knew that I had just found an ally who didn't even realize he was waiting. The cracks in our paradise had turned into gaping fissures, and through them I saw the truth. Love was not what Marcus craved. It was power. It was control. And now I had the key to dismantle it piece by piece. Cliffhanger. Clara knows Olivia's name, but the shock lingers. Olivia is married too. The betrayal is bigger than she imagined, and Clara isn't the only victim. The photograph of Marcus with Olivia became the first piece of evidence I stored in a hidden folder on my laptop. It wasn't enough to confront him, not yet. A single photo could be explained away. I needed more. I needed a chain so strong that every lie he had told would snap under its weight. That night, while Marcus slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, the blue glow of my phone casting shadows across the sheets. I began to study the laws of evidence collection. What could be used in court? What would stand and what would crumble under cross-examination? I wasn't just building a case against a cheating husband. I was preparing for war. My first move was subtle. I installed a voice recording app on my phone and left it running during dinners, arguments, and the occasional suspicious late-night call Marcus thought he had taken in private. Each word captured was a tiny fissure in the mask he wore so carefully. I created copies of bank statements, highlighting charges that had no explanation. Dinners for two at luxury restaurants, hotel stays during nights. He swore he was meeting clients. The most unnerving part was the performance I had to maintain. By day, I was the devoted wife, cooking, smiling, letting him kiss my cheek while bile rose in my throat. By night, I was the collector, archiving every lie, every insult, every slip of arrogance. My heart hammered each time I saved a file, terrified he would walk in, but the fear was laced with a kind of thrill. With every secret I kept, I was tightening a noose around his neck. Weeks turned into months, and the folder grew heavy with digital weight. But the most damning evidence came unexpectedly. I was scanning through our joint account when I noticed a series of large withdrawals. At first, I assumed Marcus was covering debts, maybe business expenses. But the trail led somewhere else. Transfers to a private account under his name, and from there, payments to Olivia, clothing stores, jewelry, even rent for a small apartment under her name. And all of it, every penny, traced back to me. My earnings, my sacrifices, my trust, funneled into funding his mistress. I nearly crushed the mouse in my hand when the realization hit. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. He was bleeding me dry while feeding her life of luxury. My chest heaved with fury, but I forced myself to breathe. Anger alone couldn't win this game. Cold strategy would. I copied every statement, every transfer, until I had a paper trail that could bury him. But something told me this wasn't enough. Marcus wasn't the only one tangled in this web. Olivia was married too, and if she thought her husband would remain blind forever, she was mistaken. It took only a few calls, a few quiet questions through my legal contacts to track down Ethan Hale. We met at a cafe on the quieter side of town, far from the polished offices where our spouses paraded their illusions of success. Ethan was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered, with exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. He didn't need me to say much, he already knew. "She's been different," he muttered, stirring his coffee though he never drank it. Always out, always lying about dinners with clients. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But then I saw the charges, jewelry, hotels. She doesn't buy those things for herself. I slid the photograph across the table. Marcus and Olivia locked in their stolen embrace. Ethan's jaw clenched as he studied it. His fist slammed the table, rattling the cups. "Then let's catch them red-handed," he growled. "Walk in on them, destroy them, end this charade." For a moment, the raw anger in his voice tempted me. To see Marcus's face twist in panic, Olivia's crocodile tears spilling under the harsh light of truth, it was almost too sweet to resist. But I shook my head. "No," I said firmly. That's what they'd expect. A messy confrontation. Tears. Screaming. They'd spin it against us. Say we were jealous, unstable. We'd lose control of the story. No, Ethan. Smart revenge wins in silence, not in chaos. He leaned back, breathing hard, his eyes still burning with rage. Silence? You want to sit here and let them get away with it? I want to bury them, I replied, but not with emotion, with evidence, with law, with precision. Slowly, the fury in his expression shifted into something else. Respect, maybe, or recognition. He understood the long game, even if it wasn't his nature. At last, he nodded. Then we do it your way. From that day forward, Ethan and I became co-conspirators. We shared information, coordinated our moves, crafted a strategy not of passion but of calculation. Where he gathered Olivia's digital footprints, I secured Marcus's financial betrayals. We became shadows in their perfect little world, watching, waiting. But as the nights stretched longer and the plans grew sharper, I began to notice something I hadn't expected. The way Ethan's eyes lingered on me when I spoke. The way his anger softened into something gentler, something almost protective. He wasn't just invested in revenge. He was invested in me. And that was a complication I hadn't accounted for. Cliffhanger. Clara realizes Ethan may not only want justice, he may crave something more from her. Living beside Marcus after what I knew was like lying next to a loaded gun. Every night, I felt the tension pressing against my ribs, every breath measured so he would not suspect. I played the role of the dutiful wife flawlessly, smiling when he spoke, kissing him goodbye at the door, asking about his day as if I cared for the answers. But inside, the truth pulsed like a heartbeat. I knew where he had been, who he had touched, what he had stolen. The hardest part wasn't the act of pretending. It was hearing the lies spill so easily from his mouth, lies polished with confidence. "Client meeting tonight," he'd say, loosening his tie with that practiced air of exhaustion. "Project deadline this weekend. I'll be late." Each false word was a dagger I had to let slide past me without flinching. If he sensed even a hint of suspicion, the entire strategy Ethan and I had built would collapse. Some nights I found myself retreating into memories just to survive the performance. I would sit alone in the quiet, recalling the girl I had once been. 22, freshly graduated, bright-eyed, and so certain that Marcus was the man who would honor her dreams. I had believed in him with a purity that now seemed laughable, but remembering her hurt less than I thought it would. That girl wasn't weak. She was trusting, and maybe I needed to honor her by seeing this through, not by collapsing into despair. There were moments of silence where the house felt heavy, and I allowed myself to breathe, not as Marcus's wife, not as the deceived woman, but as Clara. Just Clara. In those moments, the grief softened, and then, inevitably, it sharpened again when Marcus returned with a fresh lie on his lips. One evening, over dinner, he mentioned something that made my fork freeze midway to my mouth. "You know, Clara," he said casually, "we should think about restructuring some of the accounts. Consolidate things, maybe move assets around. It would be cleaner for taxes." His tone was smooth, practiced, but I heard the crack beneath it. I smiled faintly and nodded, but inside, alarm bells rang. Restructuring assets, cleaner for taxes. Those weren't just idle words. Marcus was planning something bigger, something that would strip me of the wealth I had built. And I knew Olivia's shadow lingered behind that scheme. She wasn't satisfied with being a mistress. She wanted to replace me entirely, step into the role of Mrs. Whitmore with all the power and money attached. That night, I wrote everything down. The way his eyes had flickered, the timing of his words, the subtle emphasis he had placed on our assets. They weren't ours in his mind. They were his to seize and hers to enjoy. I carried the knowledge to Ethan the next day. We met in his office under the pretense of discussing legal paperwork. He leaned back in his chair, brows furrowing as I explained. "He's moving in for the kill," Ethan muttered. "He's not content sneaking around. He wants to gut you financially and then walk away clean." "Not if I get there first," I said, my voice calm but steady. It wasn't bravado, it was resolve. Still, I knew resolve wasn't enough. I had to understand them, Marcus and Olivia, not as my betrayers, but as players in a game. Marcus's psychology was predictable once I studied him. He needed control, thrived on the image of being the man others envied. Every decision he made revolved around maintaining that facade. He would risk everything to preserve the illusion of success, even if it meant destroying me in the process. Olivia, by contrast, was greed in human form. She saw Marcus not as a partner, but as a ladder. Every move she made was aimed at climbing higher, securing more. The jewelry, the apartment, the vacations, those were just stepping stones to her true goal. My position, my name, my life. She wore the mask of affection, but I could see the hunger in her eyes in every photograph. Together, they believed themselves unstoppable. He with his charm and control, she with her ambition and manipulation. Two predators locked in a dance, each thinking they held the upper hand. But what they didn't see, what they could never imagine, was that they were being watched, studied, cornered. Ethan and I refined the trap in whispers, passing files back and forth like contraband. He would handle Olivia's accounts, her hidden purchases, her reckless texts. I would continue building Marcus's financial betrayal, his schemes to strip me of my rights. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. And yet, as I sat across from Ethan one night, watching the intensity in his eyes as he outlined a strategy, I felt a strange unease. He was invested, too invested. His voice carried not just the edge of revenge, but a note of something more personal. His gaze lingered too long, softened in moments it shouldn't have. I forced myself to look away, my heart tightening. Ethan wanted justice, yes. But was that all? Or did he see in me something he craved beyond retribution? That thought unsettled me more than Marcus's lies ever had, because betrayal I could predict. Desire. Misplaced, dangerous desire. That was another battlefield altogether. Cliffhanger. Clara and Ethan sharpen their trap, but Clara begins to doubt Ethan's true intentions. Could he be hiding desires of his own? When Marcus announced he would be away for the weekend on a conference trip, I forced myself to keep the same calm expression I had perfected. "Of course," I said lightly, my smile polite, almost detached. "I hope it goes well." He kissed my cheek, perfunctory, mechanical, and hurried out the door. He didn't notice the way my eyes followed him, not with longing, but with the cold precision of a hunter marking her prey. That same evening, Ethan and I arrived at the beach house. The irony was bitter in my mouth. I had paid for this home, designed its spaces for peace, for love. Now it was the battlefield where illusions would shatter. Ethan moved with quiet efficiency, setting up the small camera equipment in corners, ensuring every angle of the room was captured. His jaw was tense, eyes hard, but his hands steady. For all his earlier impulses toward violence, tonight he was as focused as I was. I walked through the rooms, my heels clicking on the polished wood, the scent of cedar sharp in the air. It felt almost ceremonial, preparing a stage for the fall of two people who had mocked my trust. The house that was supposed to be a sanctuary was about to become their ruin. We didn't wait long. Hours later, headlights sliced across the windows. The sound of laughter spilled into the night. Marcus's deep baritone and Olivia's higher, shrill giggle. It was grotesque, hearing their joy echoing in the space I had imagined for honesty and intimacy. Ethan glanced at me, his fists clenched, but I lifted a hand. Wait. The door unlocked. Their voices grew closer. I could hear the smugness in Marcus's tone as he carried Olivia across the threshold, as if he were bringing her into some kingdom he had conquered. "Welcome to paradise," he murmured, not knowing that paradise had already turned into a trap. The light switch clicked, the room flooded with brightness, and there I was, sitting calmly on the sofa, my hands folded in my lap, a faint smile on my lips. Beside me, Ethan's presence was a wall of silent fury. Marcus froze, his face draining of color. Olivia gasped, her body stiffening before she let out a shrill, practiced sob. But before either could speak, the sound of another step echoed from behind. A third figure emerged from the hallway, a tall man in a dark suit carrying a discreet recording device. The detective I had hired weeks ago. Marcus's eyes darted to him with dawning horror. "What the hell is this?" Marcus barked, his voice cracking despite his attempt at authority. I rose slowly, every movement deliberate. "This," I said softly, "is the truth you thought you could bury." Olivia clutched Marcus's arm, trembling in what looked like fear, but was merely performance. "Marcus, what is happening? Who are these people?" she whimpered, her eyes flicking toward Ethan before quickly darting away. She knew exactly who he was, but she was already playing her part. Confused, innocent, manipulated. Ethan's jaw clenched, and he pulled out his phone, angling it toward them. "Go ahead, Olivia," he said in a low voice. "Lie again. Tell me you were at a client dinner." Marcus tried to regain composure, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. "Clara, this is beneath you," he sneered. "Hiring spies? Dragging strangers into our marriage? You think this makes you look strong?" I didn't flinch. Instead, I held up a folder thick with papers, my evidence compiled meticulously. "This isn't about appearances, Marcus. This is about proof. Transactions from our accounts, jewelry for her, rent payments for an apartment in her name, all from my earnings." I tossed the folder onto the coffee table, the pages spilling like a confession. Ethan leaned closer, his phone capturing every word, every twitch of Marcus's face. The detective stood silently, ensuring that the recording was both legal and undeniable. Olivia began to cry harder, pressing her face into Marcus's shoulder. "She's lying, Marcus. She's trying to trap us." "Shut up!" he snapped at her, his mask slipping. For the first time, his control faltered and the cruelty beneath was exposed. Olivia recoiled, the tears drying into something sharper, fear, or perhaps calculation. "You thought you were clever," I said, my voice calm. "You thought you could take everything I built, parade her in front of me, and I'd crumble. But you miscalculated. Because while you were lying, I was listening. While you were stealing, I was recording. And now, Marcus." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Now you're standing in my house, with nowhere left to hide." He lunged forward suddenly, rage blazing in his eyes, but Ethan stepped between us, his body taut with restraint. "Careful," Ethan warned. "Every move you make is being recorded. Keep digging, Marcus. We'll make sure the whole world sees what you really are." Marcus's face twisted, his arrogance fraying into panic. He looked at me, then at the detective, then back at Ethan. Finally, his voice broke into a roar. "You don't know everything, Clara. You think you've got me cornered, but you don't know the half of it." His words rang in the air, heavy with menace. My breath caught, but my smile didn't falter. Whatever secret he was clinging to, it would come out, and when it did, I would be ready. Cliffhanger. Marcus screams that Clara doesn't know everything, hinting at a deeper, more dangerous secret yet to be revealed. The room erupted into noise the moment Marcus realized he had been cornered. His rage turned theatrical, his voice rising with the practiced cadence of a man who had lied so often he believed his own performance. He jabbed a finger at me, his face red with fury. "You think you're righteous, Clara? You think you're some victim? The truth is, you've always cared more about money and appearances than love. I had to find it elsewhere. I had to find someone who saw me, not just the paycheck I brought home." His words echoed like acid, each syllable dripping with contempt. I didn't move. I let the silence hang, forcing him to flail harder in his desperation. Beside him, Olivia shifted into her role as the helpless mistress. Her tears came on command, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "Clara, please," she whispered, eyes wide and glassy. "I didn't mean for any of this. Marcus told me you didn't care about him, that you were cold, distant. He said you had abandoned him. I was fooled. I was a victim too." The detective's recorder captured every false word, every twist of her lips into feigned sorrow. Ethan's face hardened as he filmed, his hand steady even as his jaw clenched. He had heard this act before, from Olivia herself, and he wasn't fooled. Marcus straightened, adjusting his tie as if the gesture could restore the dignity already slipping from him. "If you go public with this," he warned, his voice lower, sharper, "I'll destroy you. Don't forget, Clara, you have a career, a reputation. All it takes is one rumor, one headline, and your law practice will be ashes. Who do you think the world will believe? The respected consultant or the scorned wife?" The threat was his last refuge, the weapon of a man who thrived on intimidation. I met his eyes and simply smiled. Then, without a word, I reached into my folder and slid a document across the table. His hand trembled as he snatched it up. The color drained from his face as his eyes scanned the text. A contract, his signature at the bottom. Proof that months ago, in an attempt to shield assets from taxation, he had signed away certain rights he thought I'd never find. He had bound himself in his own arrogance, and now the very paper he once believed would protect him was the noose tightening around his neck. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but merciless. "You've been talking yourself into a corner, Marcus. Every word you say is evidence. Every threat, every excuse. It's all recorded. Keep going. Dig deeper." Marcus's composure cracked further. He turned on Olivia, his voice sharp, his mask splintering. "This is your fault. You said no one would find out. You said we could handle it." Her sobs stopped abruptly. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling in disdain. "Don't you dare put this on me," she hissed. "You're the one who promised me everything. You said Clara was weak, that she'd never fight back. You lied to me just like you lied to her." Their alliance unraveled in seconds, their unity dissolving into chaos, and I stood still, watching the unraveling with cold clarity. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to rage. Their own greed, their own duplicity was the fire consuming them. I let Marcus claw at excuses, let Olivia play her fractured victimhood. All the while, I held back pieces of evidence, releasing them like breadcrumbs. A bank transfer here, an email there. Each time Marcus tried to deny, I produced a receipt. Each time Olivia tried to deflect, Ethan showed another message linking her to fraudulent accounts. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was conspiracy. By the time the evening waned, Marcus was drenched in sweat, his words frantic and jagged. "You don't understand," he muttered, pacing like a caged animal. "I did all this for us, Olivia. For us to have more, to build a life free from Clara's control." But Olivia no longer cared for his declarations. Her mask slipped completely. She turned toward me, her face pale, desperate, her voice trembling in a different way now. "Clara, please, don't destroy me. I didn't know it would go this far. He used me. He promised me security, but I was just a pawn. I swear, I'll tell you everything. Just, please, don't ruin me." Her plea hung in the air, a bitter echo of the tears she once faked. For the first time, her performance wasn't an act. She was turning against him, shifting her allegiance toward me in the hope of survival. And I was ready. Cliffhanger. Olivia, abandoning Marcus, begs Clara for mercy. But Clara has anticipated this moment all along, prepared to wield it as the final turn in her strategy. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Every sound echoed, shuffling papers, murmured whispers, the occasional cough. Marcus sat across from me at the defendant's table, his once flawless posture now sagging under the weight of exposure. His tailored suit couldn't disguise the sweat clinging to his collar, the tremor in his hands. Olivia was absent. She had already turned on him in exchange for leniency, her testimony sharp enough to sever whatever illusions of loyalty he still clung to. I sat straight-backed, calm, my attorney on one side, Ethan just behind me. It wasn't anger that kept me steady anymore. It was resolve. I had endured humiliation, betrayal, manipulation. I had been made to doubt my own sanity. But today was the day that every fragment of pain transformed into clarity. Today, justice would be carved out of the lies. The prosecutor presented the evidence. Transfers from my accounts, Marcus's signature on fraudulent contracts, receipts for Olivia's lavish expenses. Each piece landed like a hammer on stone. Marcus shifted in his seat, jaw tight, fingers twitching as if he could still manipulate the narrative with sheer willpower. When it was his turn to speak, he leaned forward, trying to summon the charisma that had once charmed investors, colleagues, and me. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "this is nothing more than a domestic dispute twisted into a legal spectacle. My wife has always been obsessed with money, with control. I sought companionship elsewhere because she abandoned me emotionally. I may have made mistakes, but I am not the villain she paints me to be." His words rippled through the room, but no one was moved. Not after the mountain of evidence, the recordings of his threats, the signed contracts he had tried to bury. I met his eyes across the room, holding his gaze, and for the first time he looked away. The judge's verdict was swift. Marcus was stripped of significant assets, penalized for financial fraud, and left with debts he could never repay. His reputation crumbled in a single gavel strike, the man who once strutted through boardrooms reduced to a cautionary tale. He had lost Olivia, who now scorned him publicly. He had lost his wealth, funneled back to where it belonged. And he had lost me, not because I had been taken from him, but because I had finally walked away. As the courtroom emptied, Ethan touched my arm lightly. His voice was low, steady, almost reverent. "You know," he said, "I always knew you'd win." I turned to him, frowning. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, a weariness in his eyes that told me he had carried more than his own betrayal. "From the first day we met at that cafe, I saw it. You weren't broken, Clara. You were sharpening. I knew if I stood by you, you'd carry this through to the end. I didn't need to lead. I just needed to be there." For a moment, the noise of the courthouse faded. His words reached somewhere deeper than the satisfaction of the verdict. I hadn't been alone in the fight. Ethan had carried his own wounds, but he had also trusted me enough to let me fight mine my way. Still, as Marcus was escorted out in handcuffs, he turned back toward me. His lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile, his eyes burning with a twisted fire. He leaned forward, his voice just loud enough for me to hear. "You think you've won, Clara? This isn't over." The words slithered into my ears, a final attempt at power, at fear. For a heartbeat, I felt the chill of them, but then I realized he was bluffing. His empire was gone. His mask had shattered. All he had left were empty threats, and I had no use for those anymore. The gavel struck again, and the chapter closed. Weeks passed before I returned to the beach house. The trial was over, the dust settling, but I needed to see it again. Not as a battlefield, but as something else. The evening sun bathed the walls in gold as I walked inside. The air smelled of salt and cedarwood, the same as it had the night Marcus had brought Olivia here. But this time, it wasn't laughter or betrayal that filled the space. It was silence. I settled onto the sofa, the waves outside crashing in rhythm. For the first time in months, my body relaxed into the cushions. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't bitter. They were cleansing. I thought of the girl I once was, the one who had believed Marcus's promises. I thought of the woman I had become, forged through fire, sharpened through betrayal, and I realized something. I hadn't become colder. I hadn't become harder. I had become freer. Ethan visited sometimes. He never pushed, never pressed for more than I could give. We shared coffee on the porch, talked about rebuilding, about futures that didn't revolve around those who had betrayed us. He had his scars, I had mine, but together we found a strange comfort in survival. He became not a lover, not yet, but a friend who understood in ways no one else could. My law practice flourished. Clients respected me more than ever, not because of Marcus's shadow, but because of the strength I had shown in stepping out of it. I rebuilt not just a career, but a sense of self, and the beach house, once a monument to betrayal, became my sanctuary. I worked there, wrote there, breathed there. Some nights I would sit alone with a glass of wine, the surf pounding outside, and allow myself to feel everything, the rage, the sorrow, the fleeting joy. I didn't suppress it anymore. I let it wash through me, rise and fall like the tide, because that was living, not hiding, not pretending, living. One evening, as the stars lit the horizon, I whispered into the night, "Justice isn't revenge. Justice is reclaiming your life." I had reclaimed mine, and though Marcus's last words still echoed faintly in the corners of my memory, they no longer bound me. They were nothing more than noise, fading with each passing wave. The story wasn't about his ending. It was about my beginning, and this time I was writing it on my own terms. Cliffhanger. Though Clara has reclaimed her life, Marcus's ominous last words linger. This isn't over, hinting at shadows that may one day return.